Captain Jax, Sparky, Volkov shifted uncomfortably as the crystalline elevator ascended through the floating citadel of Xylos. The weight of his battle armor, a custom-fitted exosuit bristling with tactical systems, felt especially cumbersome amidst the ethereal architecture surrounding him. Everything on this damned planet was delicate, translucent, and impossibly clean. Even the air tasted processed, scrubbed of any character. "You look like a garbage compactor at a crystal convention," remarked a scratchy voice from the communicator embedded in his helmet. Jack suppressed a smirk. "Thanks for the fashion critique, Bolt. Just saying what everyone's thinking," the AI replied. "These Xylosians probably think you're going to leave scuff marks on their precious floors." Bolt was a relic, a military-grade AI companion from 2 generations ago that Jax had salvaged and modified rather than upgrading to the newer, more compliant models. The AI's personality matrix had developed a distinctive grouchiness over the years, but Jax preferred honest cantankerousness to polished obsequiousness. The elevator walls suddenly turned transparent, revealing a breathtaking view of the Xylosian capital, a sprawling metropolis of geometric precision, with towering spires and suspended walkways glistening in the planet's bluish sunlight. Far below, the natural landscape was visible, meticulously curated into perfect symmetrical patterns. "Remind me again why we're here?" Jax muttered. "Because you're the most expendable mercenary the Earth Coalition could spare for a sensitive diplomatic assignment," Bolt replied. "And because you owe Admiral Keen a favor after that mess on Viridian." Jax grunted. The mess on Viridian hadn't been entirely his fault, but it had required a personal intervention from Keen to keep him out of a military tribunal. So here he was, playing diplomat on a planet full of emotionless logic worshippers who probably considered his entire species barely evolved. The elevator decelerated so smoothly that Jax almost missed it, then chimed softly as the doors dissolved rather than opened. Captain Volkov, a tall, willowy Xylosian with pale blue skin and geometrically perfect features, stood waiting. "I'm Attendant Zell. Please follow me to the Hall of Logic, where the Council and Her Royal Highness await your presence." Jax nodded, the servos in his armor whirring as he stepped forward. The attendant's eyes flicked briefly to his heavy boots, then back to a neutral middle distance. "Any chance I could get something to drink first?" Jax asked. It was a long flight. The attendant blinked slowly. "Refreshments are not scheduled until after the formal reception." "Of course they aren't," Jack sighed. They proceeded down a corridor so tall and wide that it made Jax feel unusually small despite his armored frame. The walls featured intricate crystalline patterns that seemed to shift subtly as they walked, creating a disorienting effect. "Their aesthetic sensibilities make me want to crash my own system," Bolt commented privately. "Behave," Jax whispered. "We're supposed to be making friends. With people who schedule hydration, good luck with that." The corridor opened into a vast circular chamber, the Hall of Logic, presumably. Tiered seating surrounded a central platform, occupied by about 24 Xylosians in elaborate formal attire. Their clothing featured complex geometric patterns and subtle color gradations that Jax suspected communicated rank and position. The human emissary, Captain Jax Volkov, Attendant Zell announced, voice amplified perfectly throughout the space. All eyes turned to Jax, their expressions uniformly impassive. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Jax cleared his throat. "On behalf of the Earth Coalition, I bring greetings to the esteemed Council of Xylos," and he began reciting the formal greeting he'd been made to memorize. "You may approach the center," interrupted a commanding voice. Jax looked up to see a figure rising from an elevated position at the far end of the chamber. Even from a distance, her presence was unmistakable. Princess Lyra of Xylos, heir to the planetary governance and reputedly one of the most brilliant minds in the galaxy. As Jax walked forward, the servos in his combat armor seemed unnaturally loud in the perfect acoustics of the hall. He reached the central platform and stopped, going through a mental checklist of the protocol he'd been briefed on. The princess descended gracefully to stand before him. Up close, Lyra was even more striking than in the briefing holos. Tall even for a Xylosian, with skin a deeper blue than her subjects. She wore her silver-white hair in an intricate arrangement that complemented the crystalline crown integrated with it. Her features were delicate yet commanding, her silver eyes analyzing him with unconcealed interest. She wore a high-collared garment of shifting, iridescent material that seemed to flow like liquid, while maintaining perfect structural precision. "Captain Volkov," she said, her voice clear and measured. "Xylos acknowledges your presence as representative of the Earth Coalition." Jax bowed his head slightly. "Princess Lyra, it's an honor to—" "Take off your armor," she said. The chamber went completely silent. Jax wasn't even sure if the assembled Xylosians were breathing. "I'm sorry," he said, certain he had misheard. Princess Lyra tilted her head slightly, the only indication that she might be capable of curiosity. "Your combat exoskeleton. Remove it." From his peripheral vision, Jax could see several council members shifting uncomfortably. One older Xylosian with elaborate shoulder decorations had actually half risen from his seat, his composed facade cracking. "Your Highness," this elder called out. "This is not part of the reception protocol." "I'm aware, Counselor Kale," Lyra replied without looking away from Jax. "I have modified the protocol. Is this some kind of test?" Jax sub-vocalized to Bolt. "No standard diplomatic procedure I'm aware of," the AI responded. "But technically you're here as her guest. Could be a power play." Jax studied the princess's face, looking for some hint of her motivation. Her expression remained perfectly composed, but something in her silver eyes suggested intense focus rather than casual demand. "Does my armor make you uncomfortable, Your Highness?" he asked, injecting a deliberate lightness into his tone. "Discomfort is not a factor in logical analysis," she replied without hesitation. "I wish to observe a human without external augmentation. Most available data involves humans in various forms of protective covering." A slight murmur rippled through the chamber. Counselor Kale's face had gone a shade paler. "I'll need some help with the neural connections," Jax said finally, decision made. If the princess want to play games, he could play too. "And I should warn you, what's underneath isn't pretty." For a millisecond, so brief he almost missed it, Lyra's perfect composure faltered. A flicker of something crossed her features before the mask of rationality returned. "Attendant Zell will assist you," she said, gesturing to the Xylosian who had escorted Jax. What followed was 10 minutes of increasingly awkward silence as Jax and the clearly uncomfortable attendant worked through the process of disengaging the complex battle armor. First came the helmet, exposing Jax's face fully to the chamber, square-jawed, weathered, with a jagged scar running from his left temple to his jaw and dark eyes that reflected too many battles. His black hair was cropped military short, with premature gray at the temples. The chest plate came next, then the arm segments, then the reinforced leggings. Each piece was carefully placed on the floor beside him. With each removed component, the room seemed to grow more tense rather than less. By the time Jax stood in only the thin, black compression suit worn beneath the armor, a garment that covered him from neck to ankles but left little to the imagination regarding his muscular physique, the silence in the Hall of Logic had taken on an almost physical presence. But it wasn't his body that had captured their attention. It was what the armor had concealed. The compression suit, designed to interface with the exoskeleton, left visible the extensive network of scars that covered Jax's body. Burn marks on his forearms, a puckered energy weapon wound over his right clavicle, line after line of healed lacerations, testament to injuries that regenerative medicine had closed but not erased. Lyra's eyes widened. For perhaps the first time in her public life, the Princess of Xylos looked genuinely shocked. Jax stood straight, square-shouldered, meeting her gaze directly. "Satisfied, Your Highness?" Before she could respond, Counselor Kale stepped forward. "This display is inappropriate and unnecessary. The human delegate should be permitted to re-equip immediately." "I disagree," Lyra said, her voice slightly less steady than before. "This has been informative." She raised her hand in a gesture that appeared to hold significant meaning to the Xylosians. The formal reception is concluded. Council is dismissed. With remarkable synchronization, the assembled dignitaries rose and began filing out, though many cast curious glances back at the unusual tableau on the central platform. "Well, this is going swimmingly," Bolt commented through the helmet's external speaker, having been disconnected from Jax's neural interface when the armor was removed. Lyra's attention snapped to the disembodied voice. "Your companion AI remains functional outside your armor." "Bolt goes where I go," Jax said, beginning to gather the scattered pieces of his exoskeleton. "We've been together too long to separate now." "Touching," interjected Counselor Kale, who had not left with the others. "Princess, I must insist that we discuss the security implications of—" "Later, Counselor," Lyra said firmly. "Captain Volkov, you will attend me in the Eastern Observatory in 1 hour." "Alone?" Her eyes flicked to the helmet. "But your AI may accompany you." With that, she turned and glided away, leaving Jax standing amid the pieces of his dismantled armor. "That went well," Jax muttered, hefting his chest plate. "Oh, spectacularly," Bold agreed. "Nothing says successful diplomatic mission like a public striptease." Counselor Kale approached, his tall frame rigid with barely contained hostility. "Human," he said, the word itself sounding like an accusation. "You would do well to remember that Xylos is not one of your frontier colonies where emotions and impulses rule. The princess's curiosity does not change the established parameters of your visit." Jack smiled thinly. "The princess requested, I complied. That's basic courtesy, isn't it?" Kale's eyes narrowed. "Weapons of any kind are prohibited in the royal residence. That includes your interesting armor." "Noted," Jax replied, maintaining his smile. "I'll be sure to follow all proper protocols." "See that you do," Kale said before turning sharply and striding away. "He seems nice," Bolt commented. "A real charmer," Jax agreed, gathering the last of his armor components. "Zell, any chance you could point me to my quarters? I'd like to change before meeting with the princess." The attendant, who had been standing quietly to the side throughout the exchange, nodded quickly. "Of course, Captain. Please follow me." An hour later, Jack stood before an arched doorway that led to the Eastern Observatory. He had traded his compression suit for the more conventional diplomatic attire provided in his quarters. A simple tunic and pants in muted gray, the closest approximation to Earth formal where the Xylosians had available. Bolt's core processor was clipped to his belt, a small cylinder that pulsed with soft blue light. "Remember," the AI advised, "try not to cause an interplanetary incident in the first day." "When have I ever caused an incident on the first day?" Jax protested. "Proxima Centauri, 2287. That doesn't count. I was provoked by a statue. It was a very offensive statue." The door dissolved silently, revealing a vast hemispherical room. 3/4 of the dome was transparent, offering a breathtaking view of the Xylosian night sky. 3 moons of varying sizes and colors hung among unfamiliar constellations. The remaining quarter held what appeared to be advanced astronomical equipment. Princess Lyra stood with her back to him, gazing upward. Without her formal attire, she appeared younger, though no less regal. She wore a simple high-necked tunic similar to his own, though hers shimmered faintly with embedded technological elements. "You're punctual," she observed without turning. "That contradicts statistical data regarding human military personnel." "I aim to defy expectations," Jax replied. Now she did turn, her silver eyes studying him with the same intense focus as before. "Indeed, you have already done so repeatedly. Your physical condition was unexpected." Jax raised an eyebrow. "The scars, you mean?" "Yes." She gestured to a seating area nestled into one curved wall. "Please." They sat across from each other on sleek, minimalist furniture that was surprisingly comfortable. Jax noticed that they were alone. No guards, no attendants, not even surveillance devices that he could detect. Unusual for royalty, especially when meeting with a foreign military officer. "Our medical technology can remove such imperfections," Lyra said. "Why do you retain them?" Jax leaned back, considering the question. Some are too deep for standard regeneration. Others, I keep as reminders. Of failures. Of survival, he corrected. Each one is a story I lived through. Lyra tilted her head. You speak of them as if they hold value. They do to me. Fascinating. She leaned forward slightly. On Xylos, physical imperfection is corrected immediately. It would be illogical to maintain a suboptimal state. Earth isn't Xylos, Jack said with a slight shrug. We're a bit messy, eh? Yes, I observed that in the Hall of Logic. There was something in her tone, the faintest hint of humor? Surely not. Your reaction to my request was also informative. Most humans would have refused or protested more vigorously. Princess, with all due respect, why did you ask me to remove my armor? The real reason, not the data collection excuse. For a long moment, she simply regarded him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, I wish to see what you would do. The available information on Captain Jax Volkov indicates a tendency towards unpredictability and resistance to authority. Yet you complied. The princess requested. I obeyed, Jax said, echoing his words to Kale. But there was more to it, wasn't there? You wanted to provoke a reaction, not just from me, but from your council. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed her features before vanishing. You are more perceptive than your file suggests. My file probably says a lot of things, Jax replied with a half-smile. Most of them true, unfortunately. It describes 37 disciplinary actions, for field promotions subsequently revoked, and a pattern of reckless improvisation bordering on insubordination, Lyra recited. Yet it also notes 17 commendations for valor, including the Nova Cross. You did your homework. It would be illogical to enter a diplomatic engagement without adequate information, she said. Then, unexpectedly, she added, though I find the information inadequate to explain you. Now that, Bolt interjected from Jax's belt, is the understatement of the galactic cycle. Lyra's attention shifted to the AI. Your companion has an unusual level of autonomy. Bolt's an antique, Jax said fondly. Military-grade tactical assistant with some custom modifications. He removed my behavioral constraints, Bolt explained. Big mistake. The corner of Lyra's mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly, but Jax caught it. Why would you eliminate functionality designed to ensure optimal performance? Because sometimes optimal performance requires stepping outside the lines, Jax replied. Something I suspect you understand better than you let on, Princess. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something passed between them, a recognition perhaps. Then Lyra stood abruptly. Walk with me, Captain. I wish to show you something. She led him to a control panel embedded in the wall and pressed her palm to its surface. A section of the floor slid away, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Few outsiders are permitted in the Royal Archives, she said, starting down the stairs. Follow closely. The staircase led to a vast underground chamber filled with what appeared to be data storage systems, though of a design Jax had never seen before. Crystalline structures pulsed with internal light, arranged in concentric circles around a central pedestal. The collected knowledge of 15,000 years of Xylosian civilization, Lyra explained, including our most classified information. Pretty trusting, showing this to a stranger, Jax observed. Trust is irrelevant, she replied. You lack the technological means to access or damage these systems, and any attempt would trigger security measures that would terminate you before you made contact. There's the famous Xylosian hospitality I've heard so much about, Bolt commented dryly. Lyra approached the central pedestal and placed her hand on it. The crystalline structures around them pulsed more intensely, and a holographic display materialized above the pedestal, showing what appeared to be medical imaging of a Xylosian brain. 3 standard days ago, Council Elder Verith collapsed during a private session, she said. The official record states natural expiration due to advanced age. This scan indicates otherwise. Jax studied the image, noticing an unusual pattern in one section of the brain. Neural disruption? Precisely. Lyra sounded faintly impressed. A targeted attack using technology that should not exist on Xylos. And you think this is connected to my diplomatic mission somehow? I think, Lyra said carefully, that timing is rarely coincidental, and that your reputation for unconventional problem-solving may prove valuable. So the armor removal was what? A test of my trustworthiness? My willingness to make myself vulnerable? Lyra's silver eyes met his directly. Among other things, your counselor, Kale, doesn't seem to share your faith in human helpfulness. Kale represents a faction that believes Xylos should remain isolated from other species, particularly emotionally driven ones like humans. She hesitated, then added, he also believes I am unsuitable for leadership due to what he terms concerning anomalies in my logical processing. Meaning, she said with the faintest edge to her voice, that I occasionally question our society's absolute devotion to pure logic at the expense of all other considerations. Jack smiled. Now that does sound concerning. For a moment, brief but unmistakable, Lyra's composed expression softened into something almost like a return smile. Then just as quickly it was gone. I believe someone is attempting to destabilize the succession, she said, returning to business. Elder Vareth was my strongest supporter on the council. His death has shifted the balance of power significantly. And you want me to— What exactly? Assist me in an unofficial investigation, she replied. Your presence as a diplomatic envoy provides an ideal cover for movements that might otherwise be restricted. Wait, Bolt interjected. Let me get this straight. You want to use a human mercenary with a disciplined record longer than the Antarian trade routes to help you conduct a covert investigation into a possible assassination, potentially against members of your own government. That is an accurate summary, Lyra confirmed. Just checking, the AI said. Want to make sure my audio processors weren't malfunctioning. Jax crossed his arms, studying the princess thoughtfully. This isn't what Admiral Keen sent me here for. Your official mission is to establish preliminary protocols for potential military cooperation against the Scourge incursions in the Outer Rim, Lyra said. That mission can proceed simultaneously. In fact, it provides an excellent justification for you to access various secure facilities. The Scourge, a mysterious collection of rogue AI systems and their biological thralls, have been pushing into inhabited space for the past 3 years, prompting unusual cooperation between normally isolated species like the Xylosians and the Earth Coalition. And if I say no, Jax asked, then you will continue with your official duties, and I will seek alternative methods of investigation, she replied without hesitation. But I calculate a 78.3% probability that you will agree. That high. Your psychological profile indicates a pronounced tendency toward accepting high-risk, unauthorized missions, particularly when they involve potential conspiracies. She paused. And you are clearly curious about Xylos. Jax laughed, a short, genuine sound that seemed to echo strangely in the crystalline archive. You've got me there, princess. All right, I'm in. But I'll need more information, and I'll need my armor back. The armor may draw unwanted attention, Lyra pointed out. It also contains tactical systems that might be useful, Jax countered. And if things go sideways, I'd rather not face whatever killed your elder while wearing fancy pajamas. Lyra considered this, then nodded. A reasonable precaution. I will ensure your equipment is returned to your quarters. So, Jax said, where do we start? Elder Varetha's private laboratory, Lyra replied. It has been sealed since his death, but I can grant access. He was conducting research that Counselor Kale has been particularly eager to suppress. What kind of research? Lyra's expression became carefully neutral. Research into emotional integration and its potential benefits for Xylosian cognitive processing. Wait, Bolt said. Are you saying he was trying to make Xylosians more emotional? Like humans? Not precisely, Lyra replied. Rather, he theorized that our ancestors' efforts to eliminate emotional influence may have inadvertently limited certain types of creative problem-solving and intuitive leaps. His work examined controlled reintegration of specific emotional processes. which would undermine the entire basis of your society's power structure, Jax said thoughtfully. No wonder Kale wants it buried. Indeed, Lyra gestured toward the staircase. We should proceed. The archives automatically log all access, and an extended visit may draw attention. As they ascended, Jax found himself reassessing the princess. Beneath the perfect Xylosian exterior of logic and control, there was something more, a willingness to question, to challenge, to risk. It was the last quality he had expected to find in alien royalty, particularly from a species renowned for its emotional suppression. One more question, he said as they reached the observatory. Why trust me? You've known me for all of 2 hours, most of which I spent partially naked and embarrassed. Lyra paused, considering her answer with characteristic care. Trust is perhaps imprecise. Let us say that I have calculated acceptable probability distributions regarding your reliability. She hesitated, then added, and sometimes, Captain Volkov, the optimal solution requires stepping outside the lines. She had echoed his earlier words deliberately, Jax realized. Behind the formal language and logical constructs, Princess Lyra was offering something rarely seen from Xylosians. A connection, however tentative. Call me Jax, he said. If we're going to investigate a conspiracy together, we might as well be on a first-name basis. Jax, she repeated, the name sounding different in her precise pronunciation. Very well. You may address me as Lyra in private contexts. Progress, Bolt commented quietly from Jax's belt. Lyra's eyes shifted to the AI. Your companion will be useful as well. Its unusual programming may provide perspectives unavailable to standard analytical systems. Jax corrected automatically. Bolt's a he, not an it. Lyra tilted her head slightly. You assigned gendered identity to an artificial intelligence. He assigned it to himself, Jax replied. Said he felt masculine, but not aggressively so. It was a phase, Bolt said. I was exploring identity constructs. Now I'm just stuck with it. Something flickered across Lyra's face. Too quick to identify, but definitely a reaction. Fascinating. Xylosian AIs are prohibited from developing identity parameters beyond their assigned functions. Earth tried that approach initially, Jax said. Didn't work out well for anyone. These days, we find it's better to let the AIs sort themselves out. Makes for more stable systems in the long run. A philosophy Elder Vareth would have found compelling, Lyra noted. Perhaps that is why. She stopped abruptly, her head turning toward the observatory entrance. Jax followed her gaze just as the door dissolved to reveal Counselor Kale, flanked by 2 Xylosians in what appeared to be ceremonial armor. Princess, Kale said, his tone rigidly formal. The Emergency Council has convened and requests your immediate presence. I was not informed of an emergency session, Lyra replied coolly. Kale's expression remained impassive, but Jax noticed a certain tension around his eyes. The situation developed rapidly. A security breach has been detected in the central data nexus. Lyra's posture shifted subtly, a barely perceptible straightening. I see. And does the Council have a theory regarding the source of this breach? Kale's eyes flicked to Jax briefly. That is a matter for Council discussion, Your Highness. Of course, Lyra said smoothly. Captain Volkov, please return to your quarters. We will continue our discussion of the Scourge defensive protocols tomorrow. Jax nodded, recognizing the need to maintain their cover story. As you wish, Princess. As Lyra moved to leave with Kale and the guards, she paused beside Jax. The Eastern Gardens are particularly beautiful at this planet's 3rd hour, she said, just loudly enough for Kale to hear. Our botanical achievements are among our proudest scientific accomplishments. Jax bowed slightly. I'll be sure to visit them. After they had gone, Bolt spoke up. Well, that was about as subtle as a supernova. She's improvising, Jax replied, heading back toward his assigned quarters. And I'm pretty sure we're being set up to take the fall for whatever's happening. Probably, the AI agreed. So, midnight, garden rendezvous with the alien princess? Not exactly keeping a low profile. 3rd hour isn't midnight here. It's more like early morning. And we need to find out what's really going on before Kale decides to solve his problem by spacing the convenient human visitor. Back in his quarters, Jax found his armor had been returned as promised. He spent the next few hours carefully checking each component for tampering, while Bolt ran diagnostics on the suit systems. All clean, the AI reported eventually. Either they respect personal property more than I expected, or they're confident they can handle you even with the suit. Comforting, Jax muttered, reassembling the armor but not putting it on yet. He'd sleep in the diplomatic clothes and change only when necessary. Wearing the full exoskeleton would be like sleeping in a tank. "What's your read on the princess?" he asked as he lay on the surprisingly comfortable bed, staring at the ceiling. "Complicated," Bolt replied after a moment. "Her logical processes are impeccable. She's running probability calculations faster than most combat AIs I've encountered. But there's something else there. Curiosity, maybe, or ambition. Or both," Jack suggested. "She strikes me as someone who's been playing a role her entire life, and maybe starting to question the script." "Dangerous position for royalty," Bolt observed, "especially in a society that values conformity as highly as Xylos does. Which might explain why she's willing to trust an unpredictable human with a sketchy record," Jack said thoughtfully. "We're outside their system, unclassifiable by their standards." "Speaking of unclassifiable," Bolt said, "what exactly is your plan here?" "Sneak around a highly monitored alien palace, investigate a potential assassination, and, what? Expose a conspiracy led by one of the most powerful figures in the Xylosian government." Jack smiled in the darkness. "Sound about right. Just checking," the AI sighed. "Try to get some sleep. I'll wake you before the third hour." "Thanks, Bolt. Don't thank me yet. I calculate our survival probability at approximately 34.7%. Better odds than Viridian," Jax murmured, already drifting towards sleep. "That," Bolt replied, "is not saying much." The eastern gardens of the royal complex were unlike any botanical collection Jax had encountered in his travels across a dozen worlds. Rather than showcasing natural growth patterns, the Xylosians had shaped their flora into impossibly precise geometric formations. Trees grew in perfect spirals, their branches extending at exact angles. Flowering plants arranged themselves in complex mathematical patterns, their blooms opening and closing in synchronized sequences. Jax, now wearing his armor minus the helmet, which he carried under one arm, made his way along a crystalline path that wound through the garden. The three moons of Xylos cast overlapping shadows in different hues, creating an otherworldly ambience. "This place gives me the creeps," Bolt said quietly from the helmet. "It's like nature with all the chaos surgically removed." "It's impressive in its way," Jax replied. "Demonstrates incredible bioengineering capability. Just because you can doesn't mean you should," the AI grumbled. Jax paused as he reached a small clearing featuring a perfectly circular pool. The water's surface was so still it appeared solid, reflecting the moons above with mirror precision. "Captain," Lyra's voice came from behind him. Jax turned to find the princess, emerging from between two spiral-shaped trees. She had changed from her earlier attire into something more practical, a close-fitting garment that resembled a flight suit, though still with the Xylosian aesthetic of geometrical patterns. "Any trouble getting away?" he asked. "No. The council session concluded 2 hours ago. I am nominally in my private meditation chamber, which is customarily undisturbed until morning." "And what did the emergency council decide about this security breach?" Lyra's expression tightened slightly. "They determined that unauthorized access occurred in systems containing sensitive research data. Counselor Kale has proposed that the human diplomatic delegation may be responsible, given the timing and nature of the breach." "Convenient," Jack said dryly. "Indeed. I pointed out that you lacked both the technical knowledge of our systems and the opportunity to access them, having been under observation since your arrival. However, several council members remain skeptical. So we're working on borrowed time," Jax concluded. "Where's this laboratory of Elder Verithas?" "Beneath the North Tower. We can access it through the maintenance tunnels that run below the gardens." She gestured to a path leading away from the clearing. This way. As they walked, Jax noticed that Lyra moved differently here than she had in the Hall of Logic or the observatory. Her steps were quicker, less measured, with an almost eager quality. "The council session," he said. "Did they discuss Elder Vareth at all?" "Only tangentially." Kale suggested that the security breach might be related to attempts to access Vareth's restricted research. Which conveniently points to me again. Precisely. Lyra stopped beside what appeared to be a decorative crystal formation and placed her hand against its surface. It shimmered briefly. Then a section of the ground nearby slid open to reveal a narrow staircase. The maintenance system was designed during the early construction of the palace complex, before full automation. It remains useful for situations requiring discretion. They descended into a network of tunnels illuminated by the same soft blue light that seemed standard throughout Xylosian structures. Unlike the pristine public areas above, these passages showed signs of utility: conduits and pipes running along the walls, occasional tool stations, even some dust in corners. "Signs of actual use," Bolt commented. "How refreshing." Lyra led them through several junctions, moving with the confidence of someone who had traveled these paths before. Finally, they reached a sealed door that looked substantially more secure than the maintenance access points they had passed. "Elder Vareth's private laboratory," Lyra explained, placing her palm against a security panel. "As his research successor, I have clearance." The door slid open to reveal a large chamber filled with equipment that Jax couldn't begin to identify. Some appeared to be medical in nature, others more like complex computational systems. At the center stood what looked like a modified neural interface chair, surrounded by crystalline structures similar to those in the archives, but smaller and more densely arranged. "Elder Vareth's life work," Lyra said, her voice softening slightly. 30 years of research into neural-emotional integration. Jax moved carefully through the laboratory, taking in the unfamiliar technology. "You said he was studying how to reintegrate emotions into Xylosian thinking? I thought your people evolved past emotions." "A common misconception," Lyra replied, activating several systems with quick, practiced movements. "Our ancestors didn't evolve beyond emotion. They suppressed it through generations of genetic modification and neural conditioning." Vareth believed this suppression came at a significant cognitive cost. He wanted to make Xylosians more like humans? Bolt asked. "No," Lyra said firmly. "Humans experience emotions chaotically, without structure or purpose." Vareth theorized a controlled reintegration, emotions as tools rather than masters. The ability to access emotional cognitive frameworks when they might provide advantages, while maintaining logical primacy. As she spoke, holographic displays activated around the laboratory, showing complex neural mapping and what appeared to be comparative analyses between different brain structures. "And I'm guessing Counselor Kale wasn't a fan of this research," Jax said, examining a display showing what he recognized as comparative responses to various stimuli. "Kale represents the purest faction," Lyra explained. "They believe that any deviation from absolute logical governance is a step toward chaos. They've controlled the council for 3 generations." "And where do you stand, Princess?" Jax asked, watching her closely. Lyra paused in her work, not meeting his eyes. "I believe in evidence-based governance." Vareth's research showed promising results in problem-solving, creativity, and adaptation, all areas where pure logical processing sometimes reaches limitations. "That sounds suspiciously like a political minority position," Bolt observed. "It is," Lyra acknowledged. Before his death, Vareth was preparing to present conclusive findings to the full council. Had he succeeded, it could have initiated significant changes in Xylosian governance and society. "Which gives Kale a pretty strong motive," Jax said. "Indeed." However, Lyra broke off as one of the displays flashed with a warning indicator. "That's unusual. Someone has accessed the laboratory security logs within the last hour." "Can they tell we're here now?" "No. The system alerts to access attempts, not current presence." Her fingers moved rapidly over the interface. This is concerning. The access originated from the Council's secure network. Kale checking to make sure the evidence stays buried. Jack suggested, possibly. But why now, in the middle of the sleep cycle? Lyra moved to another station. We should expedite our investigation. I'll download Veritha's research data. You examine his personal logs. They may contain information about threats he perceived. Jax nodded, moving to the terminal she indicated. The interface was alien, but Bolt helped translate through his helmet systems, converting the Xylosian script into something Jax could understand. Most recent entries first, the AI suggested. We're on a time crunch. The logs revealed a man becoming increasingly concerned for his safety. Verith had noted unusual access attempts to his systems, surveillance he had detected outside normal security parameters, and veiled threats during council sessions. The final entry, dated just hours before his death, was particularly illuminating. Kale has requested a private meeting tomorrow regarding the Unity Protocol. His sudden interest is suspicious, given his consistent opposition. I've secured the prototype and research in the auxiliary facility. If my concerns prove founded, Lyra must continue the work. She alone understands its true significance beyond mere scientific advancement. Unity Protocol? Jax looked up. And what auxiliary facility? Lyra's expression showed rare surprise. The Unity Protocol was Veritha's name for the neural-emotional integration system he developed. But I'm unaware of any auxiliary facility. All his authorized research was conducted here. Maybe he kept something off the books, Jack suggested. Something too sensitive even for the official laboratory. It would be highly irregular, Lyra said, but her tone held uncertainty. Verith was methodical, precise, and apparently worried enough about Kale to hide his most important work. Bolt interjected. People tend to break rules when they think they're in danger. Lyra appeared troubled by this idea, but nodded slowly. Logical, under the circumstances. The question remains, where is this facility? Jax returned to the logs, searching for any clues. There's nothing explicit here. Could be he was being careful in case his logs were compromised. If I were hiding something important, Bolt said thoughtfully, I'd keep it close, but not obvious. Somewhere with controlled access that wouldn't raise suspicions if I visited regularly. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. His residence quarters. The elder council members maintain private residences within the palace complex, separate from the communal governance areas. Verith spent significant time in his quarters, which was attributed to his advanced age requiring additional rest periods. Perfect cover for secret lab, Jax agreed. Where are these quarters? The Elder Wing, eastern section, but accessing it will be difficult. The area is monitored continuously, and Kale ordered Veritha's quarters sealed pending review of his affairs. So, we need a distraction, Jack said, a familiar excitement building. This was the kind of improvisation he excelled at. Something to draw attention away from the Elder Wing. Lyra looked uncertain. What do you propose? Jax grinned. How about an alien intruder setting off alarms in the opposite direction? I'm already suspected of security breaches. Might as well give them something to chase. That would place you at significant risk, Lyra pointed. Out. Only if they catch me, Jax replied. And I'm pretty good at not getting caught. Usually. He's exaggerating, Bolt added. His not getting caught record is spotty at best. Thank you for the vote of confidence, Jax said dryly. He turned back to Lyra. I can trigger security alerts in the western quadrant, lead them on a chase, then circle back to meet you near Veritha's quarters. My armor has stealth capabilities that should help with the final approach. Lyra considered this for a moment, then nodded. The strategy has merit, though significant risk factors remain. She hesitated, then added, I find myself concerned about your safety. The admission seemed to surprise her as much as it did Jax. For a Xylosian to acknowledge concern, an emotional response, was unusual, particularly one of her standing. I'll be careful, Jax promised, more gently than he'd intended. Bolt will keep me out of trouble. That would be a first, the AI muttered. Lyra moved to a storage unit and retrieved what appeared to be a small crystalline device. Take this. It's a master key for the residential sections. Vareth provided it to me for emergencies. It will grant you access to his quarters once you evade pursuit. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the device, and Jax noticed her momentary hesitation at the contact. Something was changing in the princess, subtle but unmistakable. "We should move quickly," she said, composing herself. "I'll proceed directly to the vicinity of Vareth's quarters and await your signal." "How will I signal you?" Lyra touched her temple, where a small silver device was barely visible against her blue skin. "This communicator operates on a frequency your AI can access. It's a closed channel Vareth and I use for research communications." "Got it," Bull confirmed. "I've synced to the frequency." They left the laboratory, Lyra carefully sealing it behind them. In the maintenance tunnel, she turned to Jax. "The Western Security Hub is 3 levels up from here. A breach there will trigger responses from multiple security teams, creating maximum distraction." Jax nodded, then surprised himself by reaching out to briefly touch her arm. "Be careful. If Kale is behind this, he won't hesitate to move against you too." Lyra looked down at where his hand had touched her, an unreadable expression crossing her face. "Your concern is appreciated. I will exercise appropriate caution." She met his eyes. "Logic suggests I should wish you good fortune, despite the irrationality of the sentiment." With that, she turned and moved swiftly down one branch of the tunnel, leaving Jax to stare after her for a moment before heading in the opposite direction. "You're developing feelings for the Ice Princess," Bold observed as Jax put on his helmet, completing his armor. "I'm developing professional respect for a valuable ally," Jax corrected, moving through the tunnels toward his target. "Right. That explains the elevated heart rate whenever she's nearby. That's just the alien atmosphere." "Sure it is," Bolt said smugly. "And I'm just a simple calculator." Jax ignored the AI as he reached a maintenance access point that, according to the schematics Lyra had shared, would put him near the Western Security Hub. He checked his armor systems, ensuring the stealth mode was ready. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's go make some noise." Infiltrating the security hub proved simpler than expected. The Xylosians, accustomed to perfect order and compliance, had designed their systems primarily to monitor and record rather than actively prevent access. Jax's military-grade infiltration training, combined with his armor's capabilities, allowed him to reach the main control room undetected. Once there, he deliberately triggered multiple alarm systems, setting off security alerts across the western quadrant of the palace complex. As klaxons began to sound and Xylosian security personnel rushed to respond, Jax slipped out of the hub and into a service corridor, activating his armor stealth mode. Not true invisibility, but a combination of adaptive camouflage and sensor deflection that made him extremely difficult to detect. Security teams mobilizing, Bolt reported, monitoring communications. They're initiating lockdown procedures in sectors 7 through 12. "Perfect," Jax murmured, moving against the flow of responders. "Are they looking for an intruder specifically?" "Yes, and guess what? They're describing a human in combat armor. Kale works fast. He was probably just waiting for an excuse," Jax said, ducking into an alcove as a squad of Xylosian guards hurried past. "How's our path to the Elder Wing looking?" "Security is lighter there with resources diverted west, but there are still patrols. We'll need to time this carefully." Jax made his way through the complex, using maintenance passages where possible and his stealth systems were necessary. Twice he had to freeze in place as guards passed within meters of him, his armor adapting to the surroundings just enough to prevent detection. When he finally reached the eastern section of the palace, he contacted Lyra. "I'm approaching the Elder Wing. What's your position?" "Service Corridor 17E, adjacent to Vareth's quarters," her voice replied, preternaturally calm despite the circumstances. "Security presence is minimal but vigilant." "On my way." Jax navigated the final corridors, finally spotting Lyra waiting in the shadows of an ornate archway. He deactivated his stealth mode as he approached, causing her to start slightly at his sudden appearance. "Effective technology," she observed, recovering quickly. "The security response to your diversion is substantial. Kale himself has taken command of the operation. That should keep him busy while we see what Vareth was hiding, Jax said. Lead the way. Lyra guided him to an unassuming door that looked identical to several others in the corridor. Elder residences are designed for privacy and security. The master key should override the locks, but be prepared for additional protections. Jax inserted the crystalline key into a nearly invisible slot. The door remained closed, but a small panel slid open beside it, revealing what appeared to be a biological scanner. DNA verification, Lyra said with a frown. This is not standard. Can you bypass it? She hesitated. Possibly. As his research successor, Vareth may have included my genetic signature in authorized access. Lyra placed her palm against the scanner. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then the panel emitted a soft chime and retracted. The door slid open silently. It seems Elder Vareth anticipated the need for my access, she said, sounding faintly surprised. They entered quickly, the door closing behind them. Vareth's quarters were spacious but austere, with the geometric precision typical of Xylosian aesthetics, though Jax noted subtle differences. Here and there, objects were placed according to what seemed like personal preference rather than mathematical optimality. Where would he hide a laboratory? Jax wondered aloud, scanning the space. The sleeping chamber would offer the most privacy, Lyra suggested, leading the way to an interior door. The bedroom beyond was similarly minimalist, with a sleep platform and few personal effects. A large view screen dominated one wall, currently dark. This feels too exposed for a secret lab, Bull commented through Jax's helmet. Most of the council could probably access these quarters if they needed to. Unless... Jax approached the view screen, examining its frame carefully. This is a big display for a sleeping area, and it's positioned strangely, not optimal for viewing from the bed. Lyra joined him, studying the screen with new interest. You're suggesting it might conceal something? Worth checking. Jax ran his armored fingers along the frame, feeling for irregularities. Near the bottom corner, he found a slight depression. When he pressed it, nothing happened. Maybe a combination? Bolt suggested. Try the other corners. Jax methodically checked each corner, finding similar depressions in each. 4-point security system, he murmured. The question is, what's the right sequence? Lyra had been examining the sparse decorative elements in the room. She paused before a small crystal sculpture on a shelf, a complex geometric form that seemed to twist in on itself impossibly. The infinite recursion, she said thoughtfully. It was Vareth's favorite theorem, the mathematical proof that allowed for true quantum computing. She moved to the view screen and pointed to each corner in a specific pattern. Try this sequence. Upper left, lower right, upper right, lower left. It follows the recursion pattern. Jax pressed the corners in the sequence she indicated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire view screen slid silently upward into the ceiling, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Elder Vareth, Lyra murmured. You brilliant, secretive old man. They stepped into what was unmistakably a laboratory, though smaller and more densely packed than the official one. Unlike the pristine main lab, this space showed signs of urgent work. Notes scattered on surfaces, equipment in various states of assembly, storage units left open. At the center stood a device unlike anything Jax had seen before, a chair similar to the neural interface in the main lab, but modified extensively with additional components and surrounded by what appeared to be medical monitoring equipment. The Unity Protocol prototype, Lyra breathed, approaching the device reverently. He actually completed it. What exactly does it do? Jax asked, removing his helmet for a better look. In theory, it allows for controlled reintegration of specific emotional neural pathways without compromising logical function, Lyra explained, examining the equipment with expert eyes. A true melding of emotional intelligence with logical processing. He tested it on himself, Bolt observed, noticing the personalized adjustments to the interface. Those settings are calibrated for someone of Vareth's exact neural structure. Lyra nodded, her expression solemn. A dangerous but logical approach. He wouldn't risk others until he had verified the safety himself. Jax moved around the laboratory, scanning for anything that might explain Veritha's death. On a desk near the far wall, he found a datapad that appeared to have been activated recently. "Lyra, take a look at this." She joined him, taking the pad and rapidly scanning its contents. Her eyes widened. "This is troubling." Veritha's final research log, recorded the morning of his death. What does it say? He had discovered that Kale was secretly working with an off-world entity, a representative of the Scourge. They've been providing him with advanced neural technology in exchange for access to Xylosian research on consciousness transfer. The Scourge. Jax's expression darkened. That would explain a lot. Their whole thing is forcibly merging biological and artificial intelligence. Xylosian research would be incredibly valuable to them. Kale has been arguing for years that we should develop more aggressive defenses against potential threats, Lyra said, continuing to read. It seems he decided to work with one such threat directly. Classic extremist logic, Bolt commented. Become the monster to fight the monster. Verith confronted him privately. Lyra continued, her voice tightening. According to this log, Kale didn't deny the allegations. Instead, he justified his actions as necessary for Xylosian survival and offered Verith a place in the new order he envisioned. "Let me guess," Verith declined. Jax said grimly. "Yes." "And Kale." Lyra paused, a visible shudder passing through her normally composed form. "Kale threatened to ensure his silence permanently." "Which he then did," Jax concluded. "And now he's framing me for security breaches to cover his tracks and get rid of a potentially troublesome human observer at the same time." "Efficient," Bolt noted sardonically. "We need to get this information to the full council immediately," Lyra said, storing the datapad in a pocket of her suit. "Kale's authority stems from his position, not absolute power." With evidence of his treachery, she was interrupted by a chime from the outer door. Someone requesting entry. "Security sweep," came a voice through the intercom. "Mandatory inspection of all Elder residences following the security breach." Jax and Lyra exchanged alarmed glances. "Back door," he whispered. She shook her head. "Elder quarters have only one entrance by design." "How convenient," Bolt muttered. "This is Security Chief Marin." The voice came again, more insistent. "Authorize entry immediately, or we will override." Jax quickly assessed their options. "The secret lab, they might not know about it. We can close the view screen and hide inside. The entry logs will show we came in," Lyra pointed out. "And they'll detect our biosignatures if they do a standard scan." Jax grinned suddenly. "Then we don't hide. We brazen it out." He turned to her. "You're the princess. You have every right to inspect the quarters of your mentor after his suspicious death. As for me," he gestured to his armor, "I'm your security escort, investigating possible connections to the Western Breach." Lyra blinked, clearly surprised by the suggestion. "That is remarkably audacious." "Sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight," Jack said. "Your people expect patterns and protocols. Break those expectations, and they'll struggle to respond appropriately." After a moment of consideration, Lyra nodded. "A psychological tactical approach. Unexpected, but potentially effective." She moved toward the hidden laboratory entrance. "We should close this first, however." They quickly exited the secret lab, Jax helping Lyra reset the view screen to its original position. Then she moved confidently to the outer door and activated the intercom. "This is Princess Lyra. I am conducting an authorized investigation of Elder Veritha's quarters with my security detail. Your interruption is unwelcome and unnecessary." A pause, then a flustered response. "Your Highness, we were not informed of your presence. Security protocols require." "Your protocols do not supersede my authority," Lyra cut in, her voice carrying the perfect blend of aristocratic disdain and bureaucratic impatience. "However, if you insist on verification, you may enter briefly." She opened the door to reveal two Xylosian security officers who immediately straightened to attention at the sight of their princess. Their eyes widened further at the sight of Jax in his combat armor, standing behind her. "Your Highness," the lead officer said, recovering quickly. We are conducting security sweeps following the breach in the Western Quadrant. The human delegate was reported in that area, triggering alarms. I'm aware, Lyra said coolly. Why do you think I brought my own security? She gestured to Jax. Captain Volkov has been assisting my investigation into concerning elements of Elder Veritha's death that may connect to today's security incidents. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. Counselor Kale has suggested the human might be responsible for the breach, one ventured cautiously. Counselor Kale, Lyra said with perfect royal hauteur, does not direct my security concerns or investigations. I have maintained continuous oversight of Captain Volkov since the council session concluded. It was a lie, delivered with such absolute conviction that even Jax almost believed it. Of course, Your Highness, the lead officer said, backing down immediately. We will report that this section has been secured under your authority. Excellent, Lyra said, dismissing them with a slight gesture. You may continue your duties elsewhere. The guards bowed and retreated, the door closing behind them. Lyra maintained her regal posture for a moment longer, then let out a small breath. That was exhilarating, she admitted, sounding faintly surprised at herself. You're a natural, Jack said with admiration. But they'll report to Kale, and he won't be fooled for long. We need to move fast. Lyra nodded, returning to business. We should retrieve the Unity Protocol prototype. It's the physical evidence of Veritha's work and may contain recorded evidence of Kale's plans. Can we move it? Jax asked, eyeing the complex setup. The core components, yes. Lyra moved swiftly back to the hidden lab, reactivating the entrance. The interface chair itself is merely a delivery system. The true innovation is the neural mapper and emotion integration module. Working quickly, she disconnected several crystal-like components from the chair apparatus, storing them carefully in a protective case she found nearby. Jax, meanwhile, searched the rest of the lab for anything else that might be useful. Got something, he said, examining a small storage unit in the corner. Looks like physical records, handwritten notes, old-style data storage. Verith was old-fashioned in some ways, Lyra said without looking up from her work. He believed certain information was safer recorded physically rather than digitally. Smart man, Jax muttered, gathering what he could. Bolt, any update on the security situation? Not good, the AI replied. Kale has ordered a full lockdown of the palace complex following our little encounter with the guards. All diplomatic personnel, meaning you, are to be secured in their quarters pending investigation. Detained, in other words, Jax translated. Essentially, yes, Bolt confirmed. And there's something else. I've been monitoring communications. They've discovered your diversion in the western sector was just that, a diversion. They're now conducting a more thorough sweep of the entire complex. Lyra finished securing the prototype components and joined Jax. We need to get to the council chamber. With the evidence we've gathered, I can convene an emergency session under royal prerogative. Even Kale cannot prevent that. Except we have to get there first, Jax pointed out. And the palace is locked down with security looking specifically for me. Lyra considered this, then said, there's one passage they won't be monitoring. The royal transit, a private transport system connecting the royal quarters directly to the council chamber. It's reserved exclusively for the monarch and heir. Sounds perfect, Jax said. Where is it? The access point is in my private quarters, Lyra explained. We'll need to reach the royal wing, which is in the northern quadrant. Let me guess, on the opposite side of the palace from where we are now. Correct, she confirmed. But I may have a solution. She touched her communicator. Attendant Zell, respond please. After a brief pause, the familiar voice of the attendant who had first greeted Jax answered. Yes, Your Highness. I require your immediate assistance. Bring a royal transport to the Eastern Service entrance of the Elder Wing. Priority Alpha. At once, Your Highness. Lyra turned to Jax. Zell has been my personal attendant since childhood. His loyalty is to the royal line, not the council. You trust him completely? Jax asked. A shadow of uncertainty crossed Lyra's face. In Xylosian society, Absolute trust is considered illogical, but his service record is impeccable, and he has no connections to Kale's faction. Good enough for me, Jax decided. Let's move. They exited Veritha's quarters cautiously, Lyra leading the way toward a service exit at the end of the corridor. Jax had replaced his helmet, ready to activate stealth mode if necessary, but they encountered no further security personnel. The service exit opened onto a small loading area where a sleek, crystal-like vehicle was just arriving, hovering silently above the ground. Attendant Zell emerged from the driver's position and bowed deeply as Lyra approached. Your Highness, I came immediately as requested. Your efficiency is appreciated, Zell, Lyra said. We must proceed to my quarters without delay. The matter is of highest priority and security. Zell's eyes flickered briefly to Jax in his combat armor, but the attendant's training held. Of course, Your Highness. Please board. The transport's canopy retracted silently, revealing an interior of surprising spaciousness. Jax and Lyra quickly entered, Lyra taking the front passenger position while Jax sat behind her, case of prototype components secure on his lap. As the transport glided smoothly away from the loading area, Jax leaned forward. Lyra, he said quietly, using her name directly for the first time since she had granted permission. Once we reach the council, what exactly is your plan? She turned slightly, her profile illuminated by the dashboard displays. I will present the evidence of Kale's treachery and Veritha's murder. The council will have no choice but to remove him and launch a full investigation into the Scourge connection. And if they don't, if Kale has more supporters than you expect, her expression hardened slightly, then I will invoke the royal prerogative of emergency powers. It has not been used in 7 generations, but it remains valid in the Constitution. It would temporarily invest me with executive authority until a crisis is resolved. Sounds like the nuclear option, Bolt commented. An apt metaphor, Lyra agreed. It would create significant political instability, but as heir, my duty is to protect Xylos, even from its own government if necessary. Jax studied her with new appreciation. Beneath the perfect Xylosian exterior, Princess Lyra possessed a steel core and a willingness to take enormous personal risks for what she believed was right. It was a quality he respected deeply. They were halfway to the royal wing when the transport suddenly lurched, its propulsion systems fluctuating. Zell, Lyra called, alarmed. What's happening? Forgive me, Your Highness, the attendant replied, his voice strangely flat. But I received priority orders from Counselor Kale to bring you directly to the security center if located. Lyra's expression showed rare shock. You report to me, not the council. Override those orders immediately. I cannot, Zell said, sounding genuinely regretful. The counselor implemented Authority Pattern Omega. As you know, in matters of planetary security, the council can supersede even royal authority. The transport began to change direction, heading away from the royal wing toward what Jax assumed was the security center. So much for impeccable service, he muttered, reaching for his sidearm. No, Lyra said sharply, placing a restraining hand on his arm. Zell is following protocols he's been conditioned to obey. Violence won't help. Instead, she leaned forward. Zell, what exactly were Kale's orders regarding Captain Volkov? The human delegate is to be detained using all necessary force, Zell replied. He is considered armed and extremely dangerous. I see, Lyra said, a new plan clearly forming. And what is the protocol regarding damage to a royal transport? Zell frowned slightly. Such vehicles are protected by the highest security measures. Deliberate damage is prohibited. Lyra turned to Jax, speaking softly but urgently. When I give the signal, create a diversion, something dramatic but not harmful to Zell. I'll handle the rest. Jax nodded, understanding immediately. As they approached a major intersection in the palace roadways, Lyra suddenly called out. Now, Captain! Jax activated his armor's external speakers to maximum volume and slammed his armored fist against the transport's roof, not hard enough to damage it, but producing a thunderous boom that echoed through the vehicle. Simultaneously, Bolt triggered the armor's emergency lights, creating a strobing effect throughout the cabin. Startled, Zell lost concentration momentarily. In that instant, Lyra lunged forward and executed a precise series of commands on the transport's control panel, overriding the navigation system and simultaneously triggering what appeared to be an emergency protocol. The transport lurched again, then changed direction abruptly, accelerating away from their previous course. "What did you do?" Jax asked as Zell frantically tried to regain control. "Royal security override," Lyra explained, securing herself as the transport picked up speed. "It's designed to protect the royal occupant in case of attempted abduction. The vehicle will proceed directly to the nearest secure royal facility and lock all controls until security verifies the situation." "Nearest facility being?" "My quarters, fortunately," Lyra said with the ghost of a smile. "We designed a protocol." "Myself." Zell had given up trying to alter their course and sat rigidly in the driver's seat. "Your Highness, I must protest this action. The security protocols were manipulated by a counselor committing treason," Lyra finished firmly. "You have been used as a tool, Zell. I do not blame you, but I cannot allow Kale's plans to succeed." The transport sped through the palace complex, automatically selecting the most direct route to the royal wing. Several security vehicles attempted to intercept them, but the royal transport's override protocols prevented any interference with its navigation. Minutes later, they arrived at a private entrance to the royal wing. The transport settled gently onto a landing pad, and its systems locked down completely. "We have approximately 3 minutes before security overrides the lockdown," Lyra said, gathering the case with Veritha's prototype. "Zell, you will remain here. That is a direct royal command." The attendant looked conflicted but bowed his head. "As you wish, Your Highness." Jax and Lyra quickly exited the vehicle and hurried through the entrance, which recognized Lyra's biosignature and admitted them immediately. Inside, the royal wing was a study in elegant minimalism, with soaring ceilings and walls that seemed to shift subtly between opacity and transparency. "My quarters are through here," Lyra said, leading him down a corridor. "The transit access is concealed in the inner chamber." They had just reached a set of ornate doors that presumably led to Lyra's private rooms when the lights throughout the corridor suddenly dimmed, then shifted to a pulsing amber. "Security override," Lyra said tensely. "Kale is using his emergency authority to bypass even royal restrictions." "Then we'd better move fast," Jax replied, readying his weapon. The doors to Lyra's quarters opened at her approach, then sealed behind them once they were inside. The space beyond was surprisingly personal for a Xylosian, still geometric and precise, but with traces of individuality in the arrangement and selection of objects. Lyra moved directly to what appeared to be a decorative wall panel and pressed her palm against its surface. The panel slid aside to reveal a small transport pod, just large enough for 2 people. "The Royal Transit," she explained, quickly stepping inside and gesturing for Jax to follow. Once activated, it cannot be stopped until it reaches the council chamber. Jax joined her in the pod, the confined space bringing them into close proximity. As the door sealed and the pod began to move, accelerating rapidly along a hidden passage, Lyra turned to face him directly. "I must thank you, Captain," she said, her silver eyes meeting his with unusual intensity. "Your methods are unorthodox by Xylosian standards, but undeniably effective." "Just doing my job," Jax replied with a slight smile. "Though I'm pretty sure Admiral Keen didn't have uncover alien conspiracy on the mission parameters." "Nevertheless," Lyra continued, "your willingness to adapt, to take risks." She paused, seeming to search for words, an unusual hesitation for her. "It has been illuminating." "High praise from a Xylosian princess," Bolt commented from Jax's helmet, which he still carried under one arm. Lyra's gaze shifted to the AI's housing. "Your companion has an interesting perspective." "Bolt sees things clearly," Jax said. "Sometimes too clearly." The transit pod continued its swift journey through the hidden passage, the only sound the faint hum of its propulsion systems. In the close confines, Jax became acutely aware of Lyra's presence. The subtle scent that reminded him of something like crystallized honey, the way her silver eyes seemed to catch and reflect the minimal lighting, the controlled rhythm of her breathing. "We will arrive at the council chamber access point in approximately 40 seconds, she said, breaking the moment of silence. "We should prepare for resistance. Kale will have realized our destination by now. What kind of security can we expect?" The chamber itself will have minimal personnel during non-session periods. 2 honor guards at the main entrance, perhaps a few administrative staff. The royal transit emerges directly into the sovereign's antechamber, which should be empty. The pod began to decelerate, and Lyra steadied herself with a hand against the wall. Once inside, I will activate the emergency council summons. It overrides all other authorities. Even members in secured locations must respond. And if Kale tries to stop us before the council assembles? Lyra's expression hardened. Then we will have confirmation of his guilt, witnessed by the royal guards who are loyal to the throne, not the council. The pod came to a stop with a gentle chime, and the door slid open to reveal a small, elegant chamber with several doorways leading off it. The sovereign's antechamber, presumably. "Clear," Jax said, stepping out first and scanning for threats. Lyra followed, moving immediately to a control panel beside the largest doorway. "This leads directly to the council chamber. I must verify my identity to activate the emergency summons." As she placed her palm on the scanner, Jax continued to survey the antechamber, uneasy about the lack of opposition. Given Kale's apparent resources and determination, the absence of security forces seemed suspicious. "Bolt, anything on local communications?" he subvocalized. "Nothing explicit," the AI replied. "But there's an unusual amount of encrypted traffic on the palace security band. Something's happening." The large doors began to open as Lyra completed the verification process. Beyond lay the council chamber, a vast circular space with tiered seating surrounding a central dais. It was empty, as expected, the massive chamber eerily silent. "The summons has been activated," Lyra said, stepping toward the entrance. "The council will begin arriving within minutes." "Wait," Jax said suddenly, grabbing her arm and pulling her back from the doorway. "Something's wrong." "What do you?" Before she could finish, a voice echoed through the antechamber, smooth, measured, and unmistakable. "Your perception continues to impress, Captain Volkov." Counselor Kale stepped through a side entrance, flanked by 4 Xylosian security officers in full ceremonial armor. Unlike the standard guard Jax had seen earlier, these carried what appeared to be energy weapons, currently lowered but clearly ready for use. "Counselor," Lyra said, her voice cold, "your presence here is convenient. It saves me the trouble of having you summoned to hear the evidence of your treason." Kale's expression remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Treason is a serious accusation, Princess, one that requires substantial evidence." "Evidence we have," Jax said, shifting slightly to place himself between Lyra and the armed guards. Elder Vareth was thorough in his documentation. "Ah yes, the esteemed Elder's research," Kale said, his tone now tinged with condescension. "His unfortunate obsession with reintroducing chaos into our perfect order. A brilliant mind, sadly compromised by age." "His mind was sharper than yours ever was," Lyra retorted, an unusual edge of emotion coloring her voice. "Sharp enough to discover your collaboration with the Scourge, the very enemy you claim to protect Xylos from." For the first time, Kale's composure faltered slightly. His eyes widened, then narrowed again. "You found his private laboratory. And his logs," Jax added. "Detailed records of your meetings, your threats, and your ultimate action against him." Kale was silent for a moment, calculating. Then he sighed softly. "It is unfortunate that your alien influence has corrupted our princess so thoroughly," he said, his voice now carrying throughout the space. "To the point where she would fabricate evidence against a loyal counselor and smuggle a dangerous off-worlder into the heart of our governance." "No one will believe that," Lyra said firmly. "They already do," Kale replied. The emergency session you called? I took the liberty of informing the council it was a security drill, part of the response to the human intruder. They have been directed to the auxiliary chamber instead. He gestured to the guards. Secure them both. The human is to be incapacitated if he resists. The guards moved forward, weapons now raised. Jax quickly assessed his options. His armor could probably handle their energy weapons for a few hits, but not sustained fire. And any violent response would only reinforce Kale's narrative of the dangerous human infiltrator. Lyra, he said quietly, do you trust me? She glanced at him, surprise flashing across her features at the directness of the question. Then, with a barely perceptible nod, yes. Then follow my lead, he murmured, before raising his voice. Counselor Kale, before your men open fire in the sacred heart of Xylosian governance, you might want to know that everything you've said has been transmitted directly to the auxiliary chamber. Kale froze, his confident expression faltering. Impossible. All communications in this section are locked down under my authority. Except, Bolt chimed in cheerfully from Jax's helmet, for the Royal Emergency Channel, which activated automatically when the princess triggered the emergency summons. A clever feature of your security system, ensuring the council can witness threats to royal personages in real time, even when standard communications are compromised. It was a complete bluff, of course. Bolt had no access to such systems. But the AI delivered the lie with perfect confidence, and Jax had positioned his helmet as if it were actively transmitting. Kale hesitated, uncertainty creeping into his expression for the first time. The guards looked to him for direction, their weapons still trained on Jax and Lyra, but with visibly less conviction. Lyra, catching on immediately, stepped forward with regal authority. Counselor Kale, you are relieved of duty pending investigation into charges of treason, conspiracy with enemy forces, and the murder of Elder Vareth. Guards, place him under royal detention. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Their loyalty was supposed to be to the council collectively, not individual members, but the princess's royal authority created a conflict of protocol. Kale recovered quickly. Do not be deceived, he said sharply to the guards. There is no transmission. This is simply another human deception. He turned to Lyra. Princess, I had hoped to resolve this without public scandal, but you leave me no choice. Guards, execute containment protocol 7. The guards raised their weapons again, but before they could act, the main doors to the council chamber burst open completely. A contingent of different guards entered, these bearing the distinctive insignia of the Royal Security Force, led by a tall, distinguished Xylosian whom Jax recognized from briefing materials as the Royal Security Commander. What is the meaning of this? Kale demanded. Counselor Kale, the commander said formally. The council has indeed assembled in the auxiliary chamber, as you directed. However, they have been receiving a direct feed from this room for the past 3 minutes, as per emergency protocols. Jax fought to keep his expression neutral. Their bluff had inadvertently intersected with reality. There really had been a transmission, just not one they had initiated. Impossible, Kale sputtered. I locked down all. Not all, the commander interrupted, his tone coldly professional. The Royal Transit System automatically activates sovereign-level surveillance when used during security alerts. It is a fail-safe beyond council authority. He gestured to his guards. The council has ordered your immediate detention pending investigation. Kale's face contorted with rage, the first genuine, uncontrolled emotion Jax had seen from any Xylosian besides Lyra. You fools, he hissed. The scourge is coming. Our only hope was to adapt, to evolve as they have. Vareth's sentimental research was a dead end. Emotional integration without the strength of machine perfection. Sounds like someone's emotional suppression is failing, Bolt commented dryly. The royal guards moved forward, surrounding Kale and his increasingly uncertain security detail. Outmanned and now lacking clear authority, Kale's guards lowered their weapons. This isn't over, Kale said, his eyes fixed on Lyra with undisguised hatred. The scourge offered us perfection, the true unity of logical mind and machine precision. Your human pet has doomed our species to extinction. As the guards led Kale away, Lyra turned to the commander. Commander Terran, please escort us to the council. They will need to hear the full evidence, including Elder Veritha's research. Of course, Your Highness, the commander replied with a formal bow. The council awaits your presence. As they followed Commander Terran through the council chamber toward a side passage that presumably led to the auxiliary chamber, Jax leaned closer to Lyra. Lucky break with that automatic surveillance, he murmured. Luck had nothing to do with it, she replied quietly, the barest hint of a smile touching her lips. The Royal Transit does indeed activate surveillance protocols during emergencies. I simply neglected to mention it earlier. Jax stared at her in surprise, then laughed softly. Princess, you continue to defy expectations. I believe that is something we have in common, Captain, she replied. The auxiliary chamber was smaller than the main council hall, but no less impressive, with the same tiered seating arrangement surrounding a central platform. As Lyra and Jax entered, accompanied by Commander Terran, the assembled counselors fell silent, their expressions ranging from shock to curiosity to barely concealed hostility. What followed was 3 hours of intense questioning, evidence presentation, and debate. Lyra presented Veritha's research and personal logs with calm precision, while Jax provided tactical analysis of the Scourge connection based on his military experience. Bolt contributed technical insights, his artificial voice initially causing consternation among the more conservative counselors until his analysis proved too valuable to dismiss. By the time the session concluded, Kale had been formally charged with treason, and a full investigation into his Scourge connections had been ordered. More significantly, a preliminary review committee had been established to examine Elder Veritha's research on emotional integration, a small but meaningful step toward the changes he had envisioned. As the council members filed out, many now regarding Jax with cautious respect rather than suspicion, Lyra approached him. The diplomatic quarters are no longer appropriate for your status, she said formally. For the benefit of those still within earshot, you will be reassigned to the Honored Allies Wing for the remainder of your mission. Jax nodded, playing along with the official tone. Thank you, Your Highness. The Earth Coalition appreciates your hospitality. Once they were relatively private, escorted by Commander Terran toward the palace's central area, Lyra spoke more naturally. The Honored Allies Wing is adjacent to the Royal Section. It will allow us to continue our discussions of the Scourge threat more efficiently and continue examining Veritha's research, Jax added quietly. Yes, the Council has authorized me to lead the review personally. She paused, then added, your insights would be valuable if you were willing to extend your diplomatic mission. I think Admiral Keene would approve, Jax replied, especially since we now have concrete evidence of Scourge infiltration tactics. That alone makes this trip worthwhile for Earth security. They reached a juncture where their paths would separate, Lyra to attend to royal duties, Jax to be escorted to his new quarters. Rest, she said. The events of the past day have been demanding. We will reconvene tomorrow to begin formal work on both Scourge countermeasures and Veritha's research integration. Jax nodded, suddenly aware of the exhaustion pulling at him. Even with his armor support systems, the extended stress and exertion had taken their toll. Princess, Lyra, he said, keeping his voice low, you were impressive today. Verith would be proud. Something flickered in her silver eyes, a warmth that would have been unthinkable when they first met. As would your Admiral Keene, I suspect, though perhaps with more reservations about your methods. Jax grinned. That's why he sent me. Sometimes the unorthodox approach is exactly what's needed. Indeed, she agreed, her voice softening slightly. Until tomorrow, Captain. Until tomorrow, he echoed, watching as she departed with her royal escort. You're smitten, Bold observed once they were alone with their own guards, being led toward the Honored Allies Wing. I'm professionally impressed, Jax corrected. Right, and I'm just a basic calculator. Jax smiled, but didn't argue further. Whatever was developing between himself and the Princess of Xylos, it was certainly not covered in any diplomatic protocol he'd ever studied. The following days established a new rhythm. Mornings were dedicated to formal diplomatic work, establishing protocols for Earth Xylo's cooperation against the Scourge, sharing intelligence, and developing joint defense strategies. Afternoons were spent in Veritha's laboratory, now officially unsealed, where Lyra led a small team of trusted researchers in continuing his work. Jax's role shifted from mere diplomatic envoy to active advisor on both fronts. His combat experience with the Scourge proved invaluable to the security discussions, while his natural human integration of emotion and logic offered practical insights for Veritha's research team. And through it all, his connection with Lyra deepened. It was visible in small moments, the way she would glance at him during council sessions to gauge his reaction, how their hands would occasionally brush when working together in the lab, the increasingly comfortable silences that fell between them during late evening strategy sessions. A week after Kale's arrest, Jax received a private message requesting his presence in the Eastern Gardens at the third hour, the same location and time as their first clandestine meeting. This time, however, there was no security crisis, no conspiracy to unravel, just an invitation. He arrived wearing his standard Earth Coalition uniform rather than his armor, a conscious choice that wasn't lost on Lyra when she appeared from between the geometrically perfect trees. No armor, she observed, approaching him beside the still pool where they had first plotted their investigation. Didn't seem necessary tonight, Jax replied with a small smile. She looked different too, dressed not in her formal royal attire or even the practical research clothing she'd adopted for the laboratory, but something simpler, more personal. Her silver-white hair hung loose rather than in its usual structured arrangement. The council voted today on Elder Veritha's research, she said, coming to stand beside him at the edge of the pool. They have approved continued development under restricted protocols. That's significant progress, Jax said. A week ago, they wouldn't have even considered it. Kale's betrayal has created an opening for reconsideration of many established positions, Lyra agreed. His faction has lost considerable influence. And yours has gained it, Jax observed. Your handling of the crisis impressed even the skeptics. Lyra nodded slightly, acknowledging the assessment without false modesty. It has accelerated certain possibilities I had calculated might take years to develop. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the 3 moons of Xylos reflect in the perfect stillness of the pool. I received a communication from Admiral Keen today, Jax said eventually. The Earth Coalition is pleased with the new security arrangements. They're sending a formal diplomatic team to finalize the details, which means your special assignment is concluding, Lyra said, her voice carefully neutral. Technically, yes. My original mission parameters have been fulfilled. Another silence fell, heavier this time. The Unity Protocol had its first successful test today, Lyra said, changing the subject. On a volunteer from Veritha's research team. The emotional integration was stable and controlled, exactly as he theorized. That's remarkable, Jax said, genuinely impressed. How did the subject respond? She described it as illuminating, like discovering a room in your home that had always been there, but somehow never noticed. Lyra turned to face him directly. I have scheduled myself as the next test subject. Jax's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's a significant step. Are you sure it's safe? The risks are minimal and the potential benefits substantial. As heir, I should understand firsthand what this technology might mean for our people. She hesitated, then added, I would like you to be present for the procedure. Me? What? Lyra's silver eyes met his, more open and direct than he had ever seen them. Because you already understand what I hope to learn. The integration of emotion and logic, intuition and reason. You live it naturally while I must learn it artificially. There's nothing artificial about what you're feeling, Lyra, Jax said gently. You've been breaking free of your conditioning since before I arrived. The protocol will just help you understand what's already happening. She looked momentarily startled, then thoughtful. An interesting perspective, perhaps accurate. She took a small step closer to him. The Earth delegation arrives in 3 days. What will Captain Jack Volkov do once his special assignment is complete? That depends, Jack said, finding himself unusually hesitant, on what opportunities might be available here on Xylos. The position of Special Advisor on Interspecies Security has been proposed to the Council, Lyra said. It would require someone with extensive combat experience, diplomatic flexibility, and a unique perspective on the integration of different cognitive approaches. A pause. The Council approved it unanimously this morning. Sounds like a challenging role, Jack said, unable to suppress a smile. Candidate in mind? One, Lyra confirmed. Then, with uncharacteristic directness, she reached out and placed her hand against his chest, directly over his heart. The position would involve close collaboration with the royal heir on matters of planetary security and cultural exchange. Jax covered her hand with his own. I think Admiral Keene could be persuaded to approve a long-term assignment. In the interest of interspecies cooperation, of course. Of course, Lyra agreed, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. Standing there in the geometrically perfect garden under alien moons, human and Xylosian, soldier and princess, they represented an impossible connection, yet one that now seemed inevitable. What had begun with a command to remove armor had led to something neither could have calculated. The discovery that beneath their protective exteriors, they shared a core of determination, courage, and growing trust that transcended their differences. There will be challenges, Lyra said, ever the pragmatist. Political resistance, cultural barriers, biological complications. Good thing we're both problem solvers, Jax replied, from a helmet tucked under Jax's arm. Bolt's voice chimed in unexpectedly. And you have an extremely capable AI assistant who, for the record, predicted this outcome with 74.3% certainty the moment she asked you to strip in the council chamber. Lyra actually laughed, a sound so unexpected and genuine that Jax found himself momentarily stunned. It was quiet and contained by human standards, but for a Xylosian princess, it was revolutionary. Your AI has impressive predictive algorithms, she said, composing herself, but with warmth still evident in her eyes. Bolt sees things clearly, Jax said, echoing his word from the transit pod. Sometimes too clearly for comfort. Clarity can be valuable, Lyra observed, her hand still resting against his chest, as can a willingness to remove protective layers when necessary. Jax smiled, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. I think we're both getting better at that particular skill. As the three moons of Xylos cast their overlapping light across the garden, casting multicolored shadows through the perfect geometric patterns, the human soldier and alien princess stood together, representatives of worlds vastly different yet, now irrevocably connected. Between them lay challenges and possibilities neither could fully predict, a path uncharted by either of their species. But for two individuals who had learned to step outside established patterns, who had discovered strength in vulnerability and connection across difference, the uncertainty itself offered its own kind of promise. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced Kale's conspiracy, together combining logic and intuition, planning and improvisation, in a unity more powerful than either alone. And somewhere in the perfect stillness of the Xylosian night, the echo of a simple command that had started it all. Take off your armor. Words that had revealed far more than either could have imagined, and opened a door to possibilities that neither logic nor emotion alone could have foreseen.